Is someone actually posting the recordings on YouTube?
Well, that's up to Marcel.
Okay. I
Uh,
haven't been checking, so I don't know if they've been going up.
that's up to Marcel. So now I see all of you who are unmasked, Boker Tov, Shabbat Shalom, and cross your fingers that I can get back to the screen share. This is a break where I'll start with the text. There it is right there, and it behaves itself. Now, see that? This is so weird. That's not what I clicked on. All right. And so the beginning is it's a very memorable line. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Adonai Elohechem rashechem shivtechem ziknechem shotrechem kol ish Yisrael tapchem nishechem v'gercha asher b'kerev mechanecha echotev eitzecha ad shoev meimecha. Okay, so we're just going to do those two verses. So atem nitzavim. This is I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is a unique phrase, not a unique appearance of the Hebrew root of the word nitzavim, but atem nitzavim hayom kolchem. You, all of you, today are standing lifnei Adonai Elohechem, before Adonai your God, Rashechem, Shivtechem, Ziknechem, Shotrechem, Kol Ish Yisrael, your heads, the heads of you, your tribes. It's translating. It's translating as tribal head. It's not grammatically correct to say that, but I like it anyway. Your elders, your officials, call Ish Yisrael, every person in Israel. But note there's a little bit of a hierarchy there. But then it goes on to say, keeping in mind that this is a patriarchal document and women are not, you have a secondary role. Tapchem, your children, your wives, the stranger in your midst, in the midst of your camp, from those who chop your wood until those who draw your water. So it goes from the tribal heads down to your water drawer. So that is, of course, inclusive of all of Israelite society. Moses is not addressing one group in particular, not a tribe, not a leader, not a gender. Everybody's included, and I think that's an important element of Moses, of this speech of Moses. So before I go on, any comments? But the Hebrew is so delicious. I'm going to read it again. Forgive me.
What is the Hebrew that they're choosing to translate householder, and how else might that be translated?
Well, it's okay. Now, one of the things that Sefaria is celebrating its 10th birthday, and Sefaria is a wonderful tool. Like it or not, and I'm not sure I'm crazy about it, it made a decision somewhere along the way because it had to change translations. This was not in the original in the original documents. It made a decision that they were going to neutralize the language. God, instead of saying the Lord or some other English word that's not gender specific, it chose to keep Yud Hey Vav Hey. That's an example. And what Jason asked is another example, because it's Ziknechem, your elders, Shotrechem, your officials, call Ish Yisrael. The literal meaning of call Ish Yisrael is you could stretch it to every person, but literally it's every man in Israel. So they chose to change the translation to every householder, and I don't know what that asterisk directs you to. All right, Wendy.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on how they're changing now the gendering of it. And I see that a lot in a lot of translations these days. And to me, it just seems like people are rewriting history, because Hebrew is a very gendered language and it was a patriarchal society. So why mess with history in that sense? That doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, you can write the editors and ask that. This is something I'm going to speak about on a Friday night, maybe next Friday even, because I'm not totally opposed to it. It's easier to do in contexts other than Bible, and I think Wendy, what you're raising is a very arguable premise. Um, um, but I think the feminist contribution in all in so many of the ways that we understand our world, and not just in religion, not just in Bible, and not just in Judaism, has been a very forceful been a very forceful power in getting people to rethink things in mainly good ways. I've been very affected by this. By the time I got to rabbinical school, the feminist voice in liberal Judaism was already pretty strong. By the time I got to rabbinical school, at least in my class, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but maybe not half, but a pretty good number of people in my class were women, and a couple of them were pretty strong feminist voices. And this is neither wokeness on my part or what's the other fancy word? It's on the one hand, Wendy, you raise the point that why change the literal meaning when in fact every person in Israel is a legitimate translation. So I don't know why they chose the word householder, which actually, now that I think about it, the word householder actually has a strong male ta'am to it when you're dealing with the society you're talking about. My mind is wandering a little bit here, so forgive me about that.
Rabbi,
Let me finish, please. May I finish?
Certainly.
All right, I'm finished. Never mind. You cut me off. Okay. Christine had her hand up first. You got to unmute.
To me, it's Gail. To me, it depends on the context. In some cases, which is basically a hierarchy of the time, then it would be appropriate to talk about every male head of household or something like that. But in others, of course, you want the more inclusive terms. This one is referring to, obviously, a very patriarchal hierarchy. So otherwise it doesn't, unless they were really woke, it would not make sense to have your wives following it.
Yeah,
but to me, it really depends on the context. I'm with you in terms of not erasing the fact that it was very patriarchal.
Yeah.
But when it's a generic comment and you want to include everyone, then you go for the inclusive language, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, but note, by the way, they don't change the Hebrew. If you change the Hebrew, then that's a problem. That's a serious problem. But they felt comfortable. They feel comfortable throughout jiggering with the translation, and then the response of the teacher, such as myself, is, well, get out there and learn Hebrew, and then you won't have to worry. You don't have to worry about the English. Felice, I think you were next, and I'm not able to see the raised hand. Oh, I see. All right, Felice.
Betsy has her hand raised. I just wanted to ask, to comment and then ask you a question. We who have, the Jewish Study Bible, it's translated as the Men of Israel.
Right.
So that's an FYI.
Just a second. I know that. That was my point, that the translators of the editors of Sepharia did this in Sepharia. Now, if the Jewish Study Bible were to be republished, I would say all bets are off. This Jewish Study Bible, I don't know when it was published, but it's at least 25 years old.
Okay. And then you keep on mentioning Sepharia, and I am ignorant of knowing anything about that.
Okay, very good. I thought it's always worth. No, it's okay. Don't throw your hands up like, oh, what a poor person. You don't know. I just assumed everybody did. So Sepharia, it just celebrated, as I said, its 10th birthday. 10 years ago, two guys, I think it was both guys, got this idea of creating an online Jewish library. and it has grown and grown and grown and grown. I use it primarily for Bible, but at least for teaching purposes. But it's got hundreds. I would venture to say hundreds of Jewish books right now. It's got the Talmud, it's got the Yerushalmi, it's got the Bavli, it's got the Mishnah separate, I believe. It's got several prayer books. It's got philosophy, mysticism. It's Sefaria, Sefaria, Sefaria.org. And when you got a minute, go. It's a real wonder. And now that now that it's aging, they also provide teaching materials.
I also love that it has the Hebrew on top. Do you know that you can look Hebrew back and forth and see what the meaning of the Hebrew word is versus what they've translated? It also gives me a chance to learn more Hebrew.
Yeah, and as far as the Bible goes, and sometime when we're together, it's got tons of commentaries, and so sometime when we're studying, we might look at the Rashi or the Ibn Ezra or somebody else. Okay, Betsy, what's on your mind?
I just wanted to support Christine in her statement that based on Wendy's original point, that I think that a lot of times these translations really do need to be taken in context. And I'm not sure why householder needed to be, the Hebrew for that needed to be changed. Wait, you just lost. Okay. Because in fact, when you go on, it does. The listing is fairly inclusive. I mean, it does talk about your wives. It does say your wives. And although that's only women in relationship to men, it's not completely inclusive. It doesn't mean every woman. And I can't read the rest of it because you haven't gone down further. But, it does seem to mean everybody. And so I don't really see in context there why, the Hebrew needed to be changed at that point. So I think it does, it is the intention of looking at the context is really significant when you're trying to make those changes.
Yeah, okay. It's pretty important to get to the next pasuk. There's another hand that I didn't get to. Okay, so La'ovrecha b'ivrit Adonai Elohecha uve'ohalato. And I'm not going to read the Hebrew all the way through, but I just like the beginning of this. La'ovrecha b'ivrit Adonai Elohecha uve'ohalato asher Adonai Elohecha koreit imach hayom. So all of these people, now that we've got past our sociological and feminist issues, to enter into the covenant of your God Adonai, which your God, and they got this reversed. That I don't understand. Adonai, your God, is concluding with you today, this day, with its sanctions. Now, by the way, I do want to go back up here just for a second, because here is a kind of a special, I would say, Israelite provision, where your children, your wives, even this, there's no word for the even there. I don't know if this is in the original JPS or here, but I think it's in probably the original one. There's no even. There's no word that means even. The stranger in your camp, meaning the non-Jew, and Israelite law, once it is set up in a country, which it's about to be in the flow of the story, it includes non-Jews. You can become a ger toshav. You get your green card, but even if you're just a ger, which is how it's stipulated here, you have a part in Israelite society, among which you can bring sacrifices to the temple. And given the importance of the sacrificial cult in ancient Israelite religion, that's a pretty big privilege given to non-Jews. But the point here is, and it's very nice. The word koreit means to cut. All of you can enter into the covenant that Adonai Elohecha. So this is Moses talking to the Israelites on behalf of God, that God is making with you today. למען הקים אותך היום לא לעם, והוא יהיה לך לאלוהים, כאשר דיבר לך, וכאשר נשבע לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב. So, I'm going to just read the translation. I'm not going to spot translate it. In order to establish you this day as God's people, and in order to be your God, as promised to you, as sworn to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we'll add Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel. So what's going on here? What's going on here in these 9, 10, 11, 12, in these opening 4 Pesukim? What's going on here?
God is into a covenant with all of these people, with the men, the women, and even people that are non-Jews.
Okay, and then what is the point of Asher nishbar avotecha Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov? I've sworn to your ancestors. Now here's a place where ancestors would be a legitimate translation, but they chose to keep the word fathers. But you know, I'll write the editors a complaining letter when Yom Kippur is over.
So it's a covenant. It's a covenant for all time, not just those for all time. And it's the name of our ancestors. You remember
So starting with your founding fathers, with Abraham, with Washington and Thomas Jefferson, all the way up to you guys, I swore and I established a covenantal relationship going back, and then lo itchem levadechem anochi koret et habrit hazot ve'et ha'ohala hazot. I'm making this now Moses is not speaking in God's name. Moses is quoting God. Not only with you guys alone am I making this covenant, and its sanctions, but both with those who are standing here with us today before our God, before Yahweh our God, and with those who are not with us here today. All right. So now. This enters into I think there are two sides to this promise that's being made to the Israelites. There's a kind of a negative side and a positive side. The positive side is God is saying, you know, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel, I made covenant with going all the way back to them. I'm making it with you now. And rest assured, ladies and gentlemen of the Israelites about to cross over into Canaan, this covenant will be an eternal covenant, an immortal covenant, it's a better word, an immortal covenant that not just with you guys, but with your descendants. That's the positive side. The negative side is, you know, I wake up, I'm 8 days old, and this guy's coming at me with a knife. And I'm going, oh my God, what is this? And the guy with the knife says, well, this is called a Brit Milah, Phil. It's called a covenant, circumcision, covenant of circumcision. And because of this, you're part of this 3,500-year-old people, and God has a relationship with you, whether you like it or not, Phil. And of course, at 8 days old, I couldn't have had such a dialogue. So the other side of this is that the covenant is imposed upon me. And maybe I don't want to be part of this covenant. Any reactions to that? Okay, well, this is something to think about then.
Christine has her hand up.
Okay, yeah, Christine.
The covenant is, if you belong to a group, it's not whether or not you choose to belong to a group. You know, you are included, and you're included, you know, because of the entire context of your being. And so it's not a matter of choice, it's a matter of being. And
but maybe I don't want it to be part of my being. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a very modern conundrum. I mean, I don't think I think for the most part, maybe this is arguable historically, but I think for the most part, um, it's a 200-year-old question. Maybe maybe it goes back to Spinoza. I don't want to discuss Spinoza,
I like
but it's a long sidebar Geschichte. I like Spinoza too. I've studied Spinoza, but for the most part, it's a modern conundrum where we modern people living in democratic societies, living in relatively open societies, and sometimes very open societies say, I don't want to be Jewish. Why should I be Jewish? And by the way, my mother and father, they arranged for this mohel to come when I was speaking as a male, when I was 8 days old. And how dare they do that? So like I say, it's a modern, but I got several hands up, and they disappeared. So I know I got 3 people who want to speak. So yeah. So go ahead, Jane, and then Wendy and Sherry. Jane, Wendy, Sherry.
So at 8 days old, you don't have a choice, but you do have choices later on. A bar mitzvah, for example, you can choose to participate or you can choose not to participate. So that is a way of renewing this covenant. You can choose to go to shul or not go to shul.
Most people choose not to go to shul based on
right, especially with Zoom. You can, I mean, at 13 you become a man. All you have to do is say a blessing, and you before the congregation, and you become a man.
Actually, yeah, I need to make a friendly amendment. To become a man, you have to have a 13th birthday. That's it. That's the whole.
A 13th birthday. Okay, I was thinking along those lines. But to make a long story short, I was born Jewish. I was brought up to be totally secular. And at the tender age of 50-something, I made a choice to renew this covenant, to be part of these people. So it works both ways.
Yeah, very good, and that's a very good point. And in fact, there are points along the way in our lives that we can assert our membership in the Jewish people or not. But of course, halachically, according to Jewish law, you actually never leave the Jewish people. You're stuck, whether you become a Buddhist and move to New Delhi or not. The Jewish tradition, even if you become a what's the Yiddish, the Hebrew word? I can't remember, the word's not coming in. But if you totally reject Judaism and become an enemy of the Jews, which was very common, there were common instances of this in the Middle Ages. The word isn't coming to my head. If anybody knows it, shout it out. Even then, you can be buried in a Jewish cemetery. There was an interesting, let me look at the time here. There was an interesting example going, let me have the speakers, the people who wanted to speak, and then we'll see if what I have to say is still relevant.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I heard a talk by the founder of Sefaria, and she rejected Judaism, and she was studying to be a Buddhist nun. And she thought, well, I've rejected Judaism all this time. Maybe I should give it one more shot. And she did. And she is the founder of Sefaria.
I said 2 guys a minute ago, when I had a bell in my head that it was a man and a woman.
Yeah.
Wendy?
Yeah, what you were talking about with you were entering this covenant, and what if I don't want this covenant? One can also make the argument that, well, you also can't choose your parents, and it kind of goes hand in hand with that. I didn't choose my, how many of us, if we had a choice, would choose the parents that we have? You know what I mean? So it kind of goes hand in hand with that. When you're born, you're kind of stuck with what you're given, and then you just kind of deal with it. But another thing I want to mention, though, is that what I love about this passage where he says, even the stranger among you, I'm going to make the covenant with the stranger too. I think that's really interesting. It's kind of like my attitude when I teach. My attitude is everyone at the college campus is my student, regardless if they're in my classroom or not. It's that kind of attitude of all
Very good.
encompassing.
Very good. Okay. I guess Christine, you had your hand up. Unmute, please.
I was just thinking that the Roman Catholics basically took a page from Judaism, because you can't unbecome a Catholic even if you want to. And once you're baptized, that's it. You can't unbecome. And although, you know, we all know that you can, but that's part of this, you know, we got you for life kind of thing. But for Judaism, of course, it's much deeper. And it's also that you have an obligation to, you know, work to change the world. It's not just, you know, that kind of doctrinaire stuff. But it is true that you know, that Catholicism, from St. Paul anyway, took a page from Judaism in the gotcha for life kind of thing.
Right. Well, you know, we all know that Christianity took many, many pages from Judaism.
Like Jesus, for instance.
Oh, no, to be honest, that. Although there are resurrection stories in the Hebrew Bible, that's where they differentiated. That's the step apart from Judaism, where they took the messianic idea and then deified the Messiah. That's the breaking point. Although historically, the final, you know, the evolution of that idea in its totality and the total separation between Christianity and Judaism took a couple centuries. Jason?
I think Sherry had a hand up earlier.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I still see that. You still have something to say, or is it gone?
Yes. I just was going to make a comment that isn't the covenant, particularly the circumcision covenant, unique among religions. I don't know that much about other religions, but isn't it unique to Judaism that you have that?
Islam circumcises their boys at 13.
Which religion? Who? Which religion?
Islam.
Okay.
Jason, then Melissa.
Yeah, well, I was kind of piggyback on what Wendy said about choice, and I was thinking about how in a very traditional Jewish world, you would not only would you not choose your parents, but you would not choose your spouse, and you know, to a certain degree, having children wasn't even a choice; you were going to have them, and even to a certain degree, depending on your family, mitzvah observance may or may not be truly a choice. You may be sort of dragged into, I mean, you may eat kosher just because it's all that's offered to you. But what I've thought about in what we talk about a little bit in Musar is that intent is always still a choice, right? You can act the mitzvah with or without meaning it in your heart, and you can actually have some degree of control of your intention in how you do things. And it's when you get down to how few things some people might have had within their control, living the mitzvah or living the life and making the steps out of volition is one of the only places where you might be able to exercise control and truly be deciding whether or not you were part of the covenant. And it just made me think that you can really get it that fine to where someone in a certain situation may not really have much choice in anything else, but caring about why you do it, thinking about why you do it, doing it for a purpose that's more than just because, that's actually choice. That's covenant to me. And that's something that can cement a person's faith on a deeper level, even if they have everything else choice-wise taken away from them.
Yeah, now I'm gonna jump on that for a second. Of course, first of all, your point is well taken. You know, in Hebrew, there's a distinction between keva and kavanah, right? So keva, in terms of doing mitzvot, is doing it because you got to do it, right? And kavanah is as you described, is when you willfully, when you think about what you're doing. In a world where you do a lot of mitzvot, or even in our world where we do our mitzvot selectively, it's hard to be. It's exhausting if every time you do something, you squeeze out the meaning of it in your mind. I'm lighting Shabbat candles, let's say, which in our day takes an effort. You got to really think about it. Sometimes it's just good enough that you have the obligation to do it. On the other hand, I'm just trying to think of when you but then sometimes you're caught by it. You're caught by the candle lighting element, let's say, and there's a non-rational. I'm not saying irrational. There's a non-rational connection between the act and something larger, and then you got an I thou moment, or some other way of describing it, a sense of awe, or I'm not sure of a good word from within the Musar movement, but yeah. All right, Melissa,
I'm not sure what you can see because it says safe driving mode, which I find kind of ironic. Can you hear me though?
We hear you beautifully.
Great. So getting back to the issue of choosing or the bris and whether or not we're stuck. I've just finished reading Stefan Zweig, who was a writer in Austria before World War I and World War II. And he was so shocked at the antipathy toward Jews because, after all, most of the intellectuals had pretty much become secular and universalists. And so it was a surprise to so many of them that they were forced into being communal Jews again when they had defied their religion for so long. But I look at it more not so much as we're chosen as we're special. I think of it as we're chosen because we're expected to do better, and we are expected to be more decent and to follow the mitzvot. And so the word chosen, I mean, it gets so many different interpretations, but in my mind, it is that, we have these obligations, whether or not we fulfill those obligations or not, whether or not we reject them or not. And I'll close with, Zuis committed suicide at the end of this book, but he, which was kind of a cop-out in some respects because he was already safe in Brazil. That being said, I think that his point was you can ignore being Jewish, but that shadow of history is always going to stay with you. And so, that's a long way of saying we're stuck with the covenant, whether we want it or not, or whether we choose it or not.
Well, first of all, it's Zweig, Stefan Zweig.
Zweig. Thank you.
German pronunciation, but all of these things, not all of these, but many of the things we're talking about lead into much larger branches on the river that we happen to be traveling upon, as you probably have observed in the way I teach, I'm very happy when I make sidebars, but you're not allowed to make a sidebar.
We've noticed that.
But Zweig's experience was the dark European experience that for one thing inspired the Zionist movement going back to the late 1800s, and that's what European Jews discovered over and over again, even though in Berlin, in London, in Paris, places where there were large Jewish populations, Jews could live lives relatively parallel to what we live in America. Nonetheless, anti-Semitism and the inability of European Jews, for a significant part, I'm not even sure I can say the most part, Europeans were not able to see Jews as citizens, and so the particularity of the Jews and anti-Semitism kept rearing its head, and does to this day. I mean, all these decades after the Shoah, but I don't think that's true in America so much. I think it's possible. I think it's possible to put your Jewishness somewhere in the corner of your mind and have it either be negligible or just one of a very large number of elements that constitute our human identity. And that we are freer to do that than our recent ancestors in Europe were. But it's a longer conversation. And Zweig is a tragic figure in the sense that you point out, for sure. I think I got one more hand. Sandri? Got to unmute.
I don't know where I heard this, but it kind of made an impression on me that we were not the chosen people, we were the choosing people.
Right. Well, that's a modern way. That's 40 years old, 40, 50 years.
It's very comfortable for me.
Yeah. And it does describe part of what I said a minute ago, namely that regardless of the community you're raised in, and I just want to speak about America. I throw Canada in because Canadian Jewish life is pretty close to ours. You regardless of however you identify yourself as a Jew, whatever stream you relate to, even if you're an ultra-Orthodox Jew living in Borough Park, because of the nature of the society in which we live, we have numerous choices as to our identity. And even if you feel like you've had the covenant imposed upon you, there's some sense in which in a liberal democratic society, you make choices irrespective of what you might think. And then for a lot of us, I mean, I'm in the same ballpark. I don't remember who said this before, but I grew up in a household where synagogue membership existed until my sister, the youngest of us, was bat mitzvahed, and we all had a bar and a bat, and my mother I reluctantly joined USY, and then I came back to my Jewishness after college. And during college, I did very little, if anything, to acknowledge my Jewishness. So I'm an example of somebody who chose to become seriously engaged in the Jewish life and the Jewish community and all of that. All right. So Melissa, is your hand still up, or is this from your last?
No, not at all. It's not.
Okay.
I just can't get out of driver mode to put it down. So just ignore that.
All right. So now we get to the end of this. The way the Reform movement set the reading up, you saw that I skipped all these verses. This is the place where we're picking it up from. No, the thing is, actually, wait a second. I went too far. Here, I think this is a good place to catch up with it. Yeah. Ki ha-mitzvah hazot asher anochi mitzavacha hayom lo nifleti mimcha v'lo rechokahi. This instruction that I give you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. No, the thing is very close to you in your mouth and in your heart to observe it. Ki karov elecha hadavar ma'od beficha uvilelvavecha la'asoto. And so this is a good place to stop. And this kind of marries the egalitarian nature of who can be part of the covenant that we saw at the very beginning. This is a meritocracy, you might say. This is a metaphor, right? It's not too baffling, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in heaven, nor is it beyond the sea. These are metaphorical ways of describing that the covenant is the thing is close to you. Ki karov alecha hadavar ma'od. This thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to observe it, to do it. They're choosing to maybe the JPS chose to use the word observe, la'asoto. I may be wrong in terms of context or whatever, but I prefer to do it. it's in your it's in your very being, as I think Christine said before. It's in your very being that you can do this. You can observe this covenant. It's not for your priests, as in Catholicism, which of course is one of the reasons that brought Protestantism into existence. It's a meritocracy. Well, they're not saying it here. I'm using the word meritocracy, but and maybe that's not even what's implied here. Maybe it means anybody and everybody can engage in this covenantal life, and it's not a matter maybe even of knowledge, of specialized knowledge. In which case the author of this text had no idea that the Talmud was coming up, because if you ever studied a page of Talmud, it's a dog. It's a very complicated thing to read Talmud. Very close in your heart to observe it. Okay, questions or comments? All right. See, I set before you this day life and prosperity, death and adversity. Now, this is a continual tone that you hear over and over again in Deuteronomy, right? You do good, you get rewarded. You do bad, you get punished. For I command you this day to love Adonai your God, to walk in God's ways, and to keep God's commandments, God's laws, and God's rules, that you may thrive and increase, and that Adonai your God may bless you in the land that you are about to enter and possess. So this is probably pretty clear. Any questions or comments about this verse? I command you to love Adonai your God, which the Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu is in the book of Deuteronomy, back several chapters, but it's still part of the Deuteronomic idea. But if your heart turns away and you give no heed and are lured into the worship and service of other gods, I declare to you this day, Higadati lechem hayom, I declare to you this day that you shall certainly perish. And that is in the Hebrew, you shall certainly perish. Avod tovedun, your perishing will perish. You shall certainly perish. You shall not long endure on the soil that you are crossing the Jordan to enter to possess. So there is that as I said, Deuteronomic idea that there's reward and punishment. You do good, you'll get rewarded. You do bad, then you're not going to last very long in the new land that you're about to inherit. Ha'idoti bachem hayom, I witness to you et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, the heaven and the earth. Against you to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Uvacharta v'chayim lema'an tichye ata v'zarecha. Choose life for the sake. Lema'an tichye ata. I'm not liking the translation here. Lema'an, for the sake of you and your offspring, your descendants. La'ahava et Adonai Elohecha lishmoa b'kolo v'ledavka bo ki hu chayecha v'orech yamecha lashevet al ha'adama asher nishpa Adonai la'avotecha la'Avraham li'Yitzchak li'Yakov. By loving the eternal your God, heeding God's commands, holding fast to God, for thereby you shall have life, and you shall long endure on the soil that God has sworn to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to them. So uvacharta v'chayim, that's a wonderful phrase. Choose life. Choose life. Vote for life. That same verb is used for elections. Vote for life in order that you and your offspring may live. And then what's the basic? You love God. You do the commandments. You hold fast to God, and that's an interesting word. Ledavka bo. It means the Hebrew word for glue is devek, same Hebrew root, to cling to God, and it's a term that gets much use in mystical writing. Cling to God, so that you shall have life and endure on the soil that God gave to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Comments? Jane.
It seems to me that this parsha that we've been reviewing today is the perfect antidote to this idea that we should fear God, because I've been part of a number of Torah study discussions about how do we interpret this word fear. Are we supposed to be frightened because God punishes? But I think this is a wonderful antidote. It's not fear. For the first time, I'm really understanding that we should interpret this as being in awe, because we have this choice to do this. We have this choice to make this part of our lives. And we should be in awe of our God-given ability to choose this, to choose life. I'm not sure I'm saying this very well, but I'm just playing around as you were talking with this idea of fear and awe. And Nitzavim just gives a different spin to it. Totally, for me.
Okay, very good. I like that. I like that. I mean, uvacharta v'chaim, and then, ending with choose life. And it's in the command form, right? Choose life, not you should choose life or what have you. It's after saying, if you don't do my stuff, you're going to perish. I really would prefer that you choose life. And we moderns, I always have to reflect kind of like on at least my own theological view of these matters, that we live in a world where we don't see the good rewarded and the bad punished. It's not a part of my view of the human relationship or the Jewish relationship with God. And so I don't have to worry too much about literally being punished if I have a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
In my sermon last night, I talked about building a spiritual world based on the end of the Unatana Tokef, the charity, the tzedakah, prayer, and when I try to recite it off the top of my head, I always forget one of the three. But
Tefillah, tzedakah,
tzedakah, tefillah, and
teshuva.
Teshuvah, thank you. Yeah, these are not things that will literally change your fate in terms of whether you live or die in the next year, but these are things that can, in fact, in a way, change your fate if you embrace them as religious values and more to build a world. So yeah, the idea of being afraid of God, that God's going to whack me, is not. It's just not part of the empirical world that I observe. Okay, Betsy and then Christine. I think that's the order you raised your hands.
So I've always loved this section, and to me, it's extremely emotionally moving. Not because of the threat of punishment, but we know that when things are repeated in the Torah, it takes on great power. And so I've always felt the power of these words. And to me, it's almost like God is imploring us, begging us to make the right decisions. To me, it's really a sign of God's love for us. Choose life. I'm telling you this over and over and over. Do what will give you a good life. And I find that very powerful and very moving in this section.
And being that I've been married to you for a couple of years, I know this about you. Christine, you got the comment.
I'm interested, since I don't know Hebrew, that the senses of the phrase "cling to" or to hold fast. There are different ways that I'm imagining that. One is that you're holding is it the same word that you use when a child holds on to you, like protect and love? Or is it a notion of claiming, like, it's not just God claiming us, but we have to hold fast to claim God? I don't really know what sense what sense is intended, at least in this interpretation, of holding fast to, because it's emphasized that it's not enough to like be part of the covenant. You have to like embrace it. So, but what kind of an embrace is that? Is it the embrace of claiming, or the embrace of, don't let me go?
I can't answer that in the question that you asked. I mean, the word to hug, which may be what you're thinking about, is a different word, chibuk, lechabek. But what I can say is that when this word, I mentioned this before, when it becomes a mystical concept, the veikut, it's a expression of a meditative state of being with God, but not merging with God. There are different claims about this. There's very little of the unio mystica in Jewish mysticism, although it's there. The unio mystica, meaning you merge with God. There's often, but not always, a sense of the person being separate from God, but very Jason says sometimes the word means cleave. But I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure the mystical interpretation is what's intended here. I can't really say, but it is strong. I mean, you love God. You cleave to God, and into mitzvot, and all those other words are really kind of ways that the biblical Hebrew breaks down God's commandments. But for us, they're pretty similar. All right. Melissa, is that you're not waving hello,
Yep.
right?
No, I'm I'm raising my hand. So getting back to the choosing life, what couple things. One is we're not a very fatalistic religion, meaning we have choices. Choices have consequences. And then I have to just harken back to reading Zweig. He did not choose life. And perhaps had he been a more observant Jew like Frankl, he would have chosen to live. Because in choosing to live, we acknowledge that there may still be purpose in our lives that we have to meet. Dying, and not to say that I can understand why people, I think it takes great courage to commit suicide, to be honest. But in our faith, the idea is you have control over your life and you can choose the attitude. And the reason that tefillah, teshuvah, tzedakah are not so much, it's an attitude. If you do these things, if you believe these things, you will have a healthier attitude about life and what's intended.
Yeah. Do you know what year Zweig died?
42. So he died before the war was over. And so it's very interesting to read it because it's in the context of someone who wrote at that point in time in history. The other reality is he sounded like an erudite sort of dandy who was used to having his beautiful life in Vienna. And when he realized the world sucked, for want of a better word, he just despaired and stopped. But, he did, start to see what the Nazis were doing at a time when people thought after World War I, you wouldn't have such horrible destruction again. But he didn't even live long enough to see how terrible the Shoah was. And, oddly, and then I'll stop on the sidebar, the fact that Jews ended up, I mean, I know we all talk about this, but one reason that Israel rose out of the ashes of the Shoah is all of a sudden you had a community that was so identified collectively. It really necessitated the need for a safe place. As to America, I agree with you. I think it's very easy to be many things in the United States, and I hope that continues. The question always is, will it continue that we can be Jews openly and not meet with that kind of hostility. And I don't know the answer to that because we're seeing so much more anti-Semitism in our country even.
Well, a quick response. I don't want to, the reason I say this about sidebars and stuff is because we can now turn this to a discussion of anti-Semitism. But the way, even in spite of the rise of anti-Semitism in this country, which is very concerning, it's not at the institutional level. When it arises to the institutional level, then you start, and it's irrevocable. Then you start packing your bags. Then Canada looks a lot nicer. But what we're seeing is a growth of very frightening groups and individuals who have these, who express serious anti-Semitic attitudes, a lot of which ends in violence. So it's concerning for sure, but it's not yet at the Western European or the Eastern European level, for that matter. So Felice, and maybe we can talk about this some other time. It's a worthy conversation to have for sure. Felice?
I hope this isn't a sidebar, and it is a good segue from what Melissa has talked about, choosing life. It's that time of year. I'm the last member of my immediate family, and I'm just wondering, and maybe this leads to a midrash, I don't know. My sister chose death, and she euthanized herself actively. Is this part of Jewish, interpretation that you shouldn't commit suicide, but to retain life? And I'm sure there's some interpretations of the exceptions of accepting life over death, even though you're good and you should live, but you choose to die.
Well, take my Judaism and bioethics course, and we'll have at this a bit more seriously. But if I can ask, since you raised it, what was the context in which your sister took her life? I mean, was she ill, or was it some other issue?
I'll summarize it by saying she was ill mentally, and she recovered physically, but she attempted suicide prior to this in her life, and she finally decided to do it in.
Okay, well, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. Wendy, you.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to a couple of things. You had talked about, our metaphorical carrot and the stick of, do good and you'll be rewarded, and do bad and you'll be punished. And the whole idea of repentance and prayer and return. And you're talking about, you don't really see bad people being punished that much in this world, but I more see like the whole repentance, prayer and return thing. The rewards are emotional and not material, because it's about a change in mindset, like what Melissa was talking about. And speaking also real quickly about the anti-Semitism, just real fast. My son loaned me his book called Everything You Love Will Burn. It's about a journalist who interviewed a lot of anti-Semitic hate groups and other hate groups. And one piece of consolation you can take from this book is all the different hate groups. They hate each other too. They beat the crap out of each other on a regular basis. It's pretty amazing, actually. That's one source of consolation. They don't like each other either.
You mean within the group, or the Proud Boys beat up on the KKK?
Yeah. The different hate groups will beat up on each other routinely, and the cops don't do anything about it. They just watch. It's amazing.
It's interesting. Okay, so if the good Lord is with us, we'll get our second text up, and I'm going to call this sometime around a little after 11:30. So we'll have a look at this text. This is Parashat Kedoshim, chapter 19, in the book of Leviticus. So I'm being rewarded for having taught a good section. It came up with no problem. Let's get this font a little larger. Nope. What just happened?
Let's see.
Okay. So it opens up with a tantalizing question, and this may give rise to some discussion. I hope it does. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses, saying, "Daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael, va'amarta alehem kadoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem." So Yahweh says to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, speak to the whole Israelite community." And there is that inclusiveness in the Hebrew. Call adat b'nei Yisrael. Speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, Kadoshim tihiyu, you shall be holy, for I, your God, for I, Yahweh, your God, am holy. So raises two things immediately. One, what does it mean for us to be holy? What does it mean for God to be holy?
You looking for an answer? That's a there's quite a few volumes on that.
Well, so let's speak one volume anyway. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the interpretation that I have taken is that, you know, we can see pieces of God through God's characteristics. We can't see all of God. And so we can understand some of the ways in which we see God's behavior, and we can choose to emulate in the positive characteristics. You know, we also see that God has anger, so we understand that anger is also in us, but, you know, we can try to find the positive side of anger. So holiness is in the view that I take it as is trying to emulate as much as possible the positives that are given to us as examples.
Did you freeze or did you finish? Okay. All right, Harvey?
What does holy mean? That's my question. It's a simple question.
No, that's my question.
I mean, we're using the word holy as if we know what it means, but what does holy really mean? I mean, it's like, you know, you can make a lot of circles around it, but there's got to be a much more specific definition.
Well, I don't know. You know, if you've ever read,
Doesn't holy in this context mean to make the to do the covenant, to do the mitzvahs?
well, we're not in Deuteronomy anymore. We're not in Kansas anymore. So we're not necessarily focusing here on covenant, but it's a possibility. I mean, you could say
we're carrying those things with us, aren't we? Aren't we building into a people?
I missed what you said. Could you say it again?
We're carrying those things with us, those ideas, aren't we? Building into a people.
Yeah, but
that doesn't define the word. That doesn't define what holy is. I mean, saying, well, you know, doing
holy would be doing covenants, would be doing mitzvahs, would be doing the law. Would be the things we were asked.
Is that right?
Sure. I'm not sure that that's really what holy means. I mean, holy to me, you know, it implies some kind of spiritual identity of some sort. You know, that there's, you know, one would be separate from the profane, but, you know, I still don't understand the word holy. I'm just really confused.
Don't you feel holy when you do certain mitzvahs? When you do certain things?
Well, that's the question. You're saying it rhetorically as if that's the case, and it might be the case. If you can think back to your college days, or maybe even later, if you've ever read a Platonic dialogue, you know, Socrates is always asking the meaning of beauty and truth and law. And you know, the first dialogue I read was the Euthyphro, which he asks I forget the word now, but is what is the good what we say it is, or is the good? If anybody's read it, I'm not getting it right. But my point is that the question in a Platonic dialogue is never answered. It's never answered. Of all Socrates, you might think Socrates has the answer in his head, but
That's true.
maybe all he does is ask really good questions. The people who think they know the answer, but when they're done playing with Socrates, they realize they don't. And in fact, one way of looking at the process of philosophy, the whole history of philosophy, may be parallel to a Platonic dialogue, namely that philosophy is this long and highly intellectualized tradition of trying to find answers, but the process is the process, and the answers are never definite. But I see lots of hands are up, so let's. And I lost the order in which they were raised, so I'm going from bottom to top. Betsy, then Sandy, and then Christine, and then Felice.
Okay. Okay, I'll just be quick because I think holy, like many other words, like love, for instance, is not an easy definition, and I don't think there is one definition, and I think it is highly interpretive. So, I mean, I'm sure you can go to the dictionary and find out, you know, a definition of holy, but I think it's a very, very personal, widely interpretive idea. And so ideas can never be captured so easily. I'll just say that for myself, because I've thought, you know, when you think about your life and the values that you have, to me, holy is one of the things I love about Judaism is that so much of belief is it's not just belief, it's about action. And belief has to be made real by action. So for me, and when I look at my life, particularly as I've gotten older, because I think your definitions often change, they always change as you have more life experiences. I think holy is about bringing good, also a very subjective word, into the world. And that when you do that, you know, so much of Judaism is about bringing God into the world. That to me, which is still extremely broad, is what's holy.
But what does it mean? What does it mean to bring God into the world? I don't understand that.
So to me, and you know, I probably don't have to say this to you, but I'll you know, say it in the context of this class. It's about actualizing beliefs. It's about doing things in the world. It's about actions. It's about not just talking about things, but trying to have an impact in the world on other people. And in that, you know, that does incredible things for me. I think it has some impact on other people. And I think that's, you know, I don't know. I think that's what God wants me to do. I think that's what being holy is about. And I think that's what makes me feel most like I'm being holy and have any kind of relationship with God. So that's my definition.
Okay,
very personal.
My understanding. Rabbi, my understanding.
Oh, Sandy's next.
Okay. I was just Googled, and it says holiness, the biblical definition of holy. Holiness is commonly defined as being separate or set apart. God is holy in that he is set apart from everything that is not God. And God's people must be holy by being set apart from sin. Holiness, according to this definition, is separateness that entails moral purity. I'm not sure I even understand. And it says, what does it take to be holy? Honor God. If we want to be holy, we must honor and reverence God. Show love. God is love, which actually comes from the Christian Bible. Honor parents. Serve others. Abstain from sin and marketplace conduct.
Abstain from, and I presume that means that you should have ethical marketplace conduct. I mean, those are helpful. I mean, the word kadosh, I could have said earlier, the word one meaning of the Hebrew word kadash is to be separate. But my response to that could be, those are all nice ideas and helpful. But let's and in fact, I will say, where it says, "You shall be holy, for I, your God, am holy." Kadoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. And so then there's this idea of measuring my holiness, my understanding of holiness, against my understanding of God as being holy. But that's even in a, well, I don't want to qualify this.
My understanding, if I could squeeze in here.
Finish, please. Yeah, we're always measuring ourselves and our notion of holiness against God's holiness. But our own understanding of God's holiness, if you think about us as being theologically oriented people, is always evolving. So there's this kind of wheels within wheels, and perhaps never actually arriving at a solid, a solid understanding, because it's always in motion. Now, who did I cut off?
Ezra.
Go ahead.
My understanding has always been that holy deals with things like ritual or observing Sabbath, not something that's moral, like being honest in business or being charitable.
Yeah. So those are
the difference between ritual and because a lot of things that are done that are considered holy have nothing to do with morality.
Well, that's true. That's very true. But that they can give you a sense of being connected to a larger transcendent whole. Like the example I used before of lighting candles. Sometimes you light candles because it's an obligation you've taken on. Sometimes when you expect it or least expect it, that action of lighting candles, to bring in a holiday or Shabbat, brings you into a moment of transcendence. That's true.
There's one other thing that I hear a lot about, loving God or being in awe of God. I don't find any problem with fearing God or being in awe of God. And it's not a phrase that I've coined, but it resonates with me. And that is that it is very difficult to love God, and God knows it.
Why is it difficult to love God?
Of all the things that, I guess, if you look at all the things that have gone wrong in the world and the horrors that weren't prevented.
Are they God's fault?
No, I don't think they're God's fault.
This is a wonderful conversation. Okay, so I guess Christine, Elise, and Wendy. And then we'll see where we are.
I think Felice was first.
Okay.
Wendy, actually. Wendy. Actually, Wendy.
Okay, go ahead, Wendy, you're up.
Thanks. Kedoshim was Eva's Torah portion for her bat mitzvah. So we talked about this quite a bit. And because a lot of Kedoshim is kind of restating the 10 commandments or the 10 things more accurately. But so yeah, that is something that Eva and I discussed as well, because I was pretty active in helping writing her Devar. And like someone else said a minute ago, the idea of being separate is kind of baked into being holy. And and speaking of being commanded to love God, I dated someone once who was a convert to Judaism, and he had previously been a pastor. And he wrote his own edition of the Christian Bible and then converted when he was done to Judaism. But he said, one thing that he said that has stayed with me is that if it was easy, it wouldn't be a commandment. And so we are commanded multiple times in the Torah to love God.
Uh-huh. Okay, all right, I like that. All right, then Felice and then Christine.
Actually, I was last, but I'll jump in if I may, although I like your commentary much better than listening to myself. So I look forward to your commentary, Christina. Anyway, holy to me, if you put an H before it, defines holy. It's the whole of things. WHOL. Is that how you spell holy? Whole. Anyway, what I'm getting at is playing on the letter W. And with the letter W in front of holy, HOLY, comes up with the W questions. And as Jews, and I like to sort of comment on Betsy's commentary, that actualizing the philosophy of, let's see if I can come up with it, of, I can't think of it right now, my philosophy course. Anyway, actualizing is part of where Jews are in being WHOLE, whole. And actualizing to me comes from also, and Betsy brought this up, actions speak louder than words at times, but thinking as Jews is part of being whole. And I'm teaching ESL now, and being motivated to become educated is part of holy to me, is learning and going in that direction, not religiously, unfortunately, but or a predetermined, I'm not sure that's the correct word. I'm better at writing than thinking spontaneously and then speaking, but that we can't just accept God per se as holy, but we have to think about what we want in the meanings of words before we act. And then part of this commentary is actualizing in being educated and always asking the W, 5W, is it the 5W and the H word questions. So to me, that's part of holy. It's not a religious, theological concept, but a Jewish, to me, educated concept.
Okay, and Christine?
Yes, I can't help it, but I recall one of the Hopi sayings, which is in a sacred way we walk, which is basically that we are corporeal, we walk, we are part of the world, but in a sacred way, which is that we're mindful and that we imbue this notion of that it's more than that. And it's also this kind of connection to the unseen world and culture and the creative force that we mustn't escape that we are walking in a sacred way. It's mindfulness of that larger than responsibility and gift.
Okay, and Betsy, you got a hand up? You want to say something more? Is this from your last time?
Nope, I forgot to take it down.
All right, well, we've reached the end of the hour. So the you might say corporeal entailments of holiness in that text, you'll have to wait till Yom Kippur afternoon when we read from the Torah. Just to make either a reminder or point out, if you're interested, right after Shachari on Yom Kippur, I'll be teaching a class on Jonah. The book the book of Jonah is short enough to be able to do a reasonably good job covering it in an hour. So you're invited to come participate in that. And this is a good way of getting ready for tomorrow night, eh? You know, with the onset of Kol Nidre and into this day that I'm kind of on tap from 10 in the morning till about 6 in the afternoon. I don't think I'm going to get much of a break, but not to worry. Anybody have anything to add to this before we call in the morning? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the fact that so many of you want to study Torah. You know, I came from a synagogue which was larger than TVE, and I couldn't wrestle up more than 3 or 4 people to study Torah, and we did it in a what do you call it, in person and online, you know, in a hybrid capacity. So I'm really pleased that we got a number of people who want to wrestle with these texts and these ideas, and who make very good contributions. So Gemara Chatima Tova, you should all be signed and sealed in the book of life, so that you're all here through the year, and nothing surprising happens. Nothing bad and surprising happens to any of us. And see you for Yom Kippur.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi. This was a wonderful
Not
session.
Tova.
Everybody, thank you, Rabbi, and everybody pay attention to the kids when they do the Torah portion, because you've heard it here and you will understand it better. Thank
Great.
you. Great.
Shabbat shalom. Gemar tov.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom. Thanks,
Shabbat shalom,
Caroline.
everyone.
Bye.
Hey, Rabbi,
Bye.
one quick thing before I go. I'm
Yeah.
still thinking about my midrash about Moses and his character. And I had a thought when it says Moses went out to view his kinsmen out in the fields. And I had the thought, what if he was looking for trouble? Because he hadn't done it before, right?
Well, that's an interesting.
Maybe he wants to stir things up. I don't think he was planning on murdering anybody. But that was just a thought I had. So I'm going to add that in there too.
It's a good idea. I like it. Okay.
All right.
Mark,
Shabbat shalom.
bye-bye.